one person.
Welcome to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Gold Mine. We have another fantastic show for you planned today. It hasn't happened the way we wanted it to happen, but we're going to run with it anyway. So make sure that you are also following the newsletter. Every week it comes out. Here we go. See, I can hear it. Here we go. It's already happening. I've completely lost it.
Tactical pause.
Tactical pause. Here we go. For those of you that haven't yet, sign up for the newsletter. We got the reinforcement loop coming out twice a week, and that way you can stay in the loop with everything that we're doing and all of the information, especially Shaun's thoughts. You guys got to get that. That is it's a beautiful piece of writing that brings everything together. It's fantastic. Now, while I am screwing everything up, you shouldn't. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails when we go live, of course, Wednesdays for the Gold Mine, Fridays for the Collective, and yeah, I'm running on a very thin edge today. So
you are.
Let's roll with it. Have a good conversation. I've been trying to rebuild a computer, having things fail miserably in my face constantly, and running. I got 7 million other things to do right now, and I'm trying to stay in the moment right now. So, how are you doing out in the mountains?
Sorry, I can't hear you for your wild echo that you've got going on.
Yeah, there we go.
Things are good out here. Things are good out here. And you know what? All joking aside, for anyone who's going to listen to this later today, Chance has been up against it for the last few days with his new workstation build that he's got going on. It's some reasonably cutting edge hardware that he's putting together. These things never go together quite as simply as they should, and therefore he's been facing some frustration. We've had a couple of laughs about it, not just today, but over the last few days. And if he is frazzled right now, just know that his job already is pretty freaking hard. Like his intro is no easy thing. The whole podcasting thing is not easy, particularly when it's live. So, let's cut Chance some slack.
I don't think I would ever have heard those words coming out of your mouth, cutting me some slack. Wow. Well, I'm excited to talk about this anyway. We got Daniel Labonte on the Instagram side at Day and Afternoon, gents. We haven't seen him in a while. That's awesome. Do comment in anything you guys want to talk about. We can hit anything you guys want today. It's just kind of a free-flowing show. The build of my dreams is coming together, though. It's finally working. I have a boot drive ready to go. I'm just about to do that as we finish up here, and I'll be able to get it up and running, but it is frustrating. Interestingly enough, it wasn't my fault what happened. For anybody that doesn't know, I've been having some frustration, having things fail on me, having put one thing in, doesn't work, et cetera, et cetera. It is a random manufacturing defect that the CPU arced when I booted it up, and it actually started throwing pins into the motherboard and just toasted them both right off the bat. And now we got a new motherboard, we got a new CPU, and it's running and everything is good. I actually have the BIOS up on this side right now, and I'm stoked to get it working because it's a beast.
Oh yeah, it is. I mean, that graphics card that you bought, that was the 5080. That is just a ripper. And of course, the motherboard CPU combo that you've got, along with all of it, that machine is going to crush. Now, that's not like it's not like you went out there and were frivolous or exorbitant. It's not like you willfully tried to spend as much money as possible. As far as I'm concerned, all of those choices. Well, no, all of those choices were sound choices. They were, as far as I'm concerned, the sweet spot of what is required for your particular roles and responsibilities right now in respect to podcasting, video creation, and all of that good stuff. It requires a good machine to do what you're doing. And quite frankly, I'm surprised your old machine lasted as long as it did, particularly with the caliber of videos that you're putting out right now. It crunches hard on a workstation. So I think it's great. It's exciting that you're going to have that level of machine. But, the reality is that in order to create that kind of machine right now with all the tariffs and all the nonsense that's going on, like, it's super freaking expensive. I know exactly what you paid for it. What I don't know is how much you had to pay for your multiple return trips to Memory Express, etc. But, it's all part of the game, baby.
That is part of the game. And, interestingly enough, when we were joking about this the other day, it made me really have to know what I was doing was worth it. Because, I could have given up 7 million times for more. I could have handed it off to somebody else. I could have gotten a store built one, but I wanted something specific. I wanted to be able to utilize the skill set that I'm building, especially with the video editing. It is it's a killer. And the more things that I add, the more stuff that I do, I need a more and more competent machine running. So this has been a trial of patience for sure, but one that I've needed. I haven't been, I guess, pushed to this kind of limit to try and troubleshoot on the fly under time constraints in a long time. So
that's good. It's great. And I know it's tiring. I know it's a bit of a frazzler, of course, but it's a good reminder as to what you're actually capable of in these kind of situations. And I know how difficult it was for you. I know how difficult these things are. I've faced that difficulty myself many times. But here's an interesting thing, because of course we don't have the show that we did have planned is not occurring right now. So we're just free flowing back and forth for anyone who's not aware. I will say this, that, what you did is a good lesson, and you learned a ton, of course, but there is another lesson in there, and that's the conversation surrounding at what point do you make a tactical pause, or at what point do you do a pattern interrupt in the process of trying to defeat it? And it's not like you put your hands up in surrender, but you simply step back and think, how can I best use my resources, which is time and money? And so I know you were trying to do it as cheap as possible, but then giving up a bunch of time to try to fix something that was kind of beyond you is resources that could have been spent in other ways. And so I'm just going to give you an example of a way that I learned how to do this a little bit better back in the day. So the first time I ever had to teach a system engineer program, or a course, sorry, I had about 30 servers that I had to build. And this is back in the day when it was not as easy as it is now. Things did not go together well. It was old school. And so I had to build 30 servers from scratch. And then I had to load on a server program, which was NT 3.51 server, and then workstation, and then build out an entire LAN classroom for my class that was starting on Monday. And effectively what I had to do that weekend was I showed up about, I think it was Friday evening or whatever the case is, and I worked nonstop through the entire weekend. I didn't even leave. I slept right in my classroom on the floor. And then I woke up and I just kept building. And when I'd get hungry, if I'd run out of food, I'd go to the nearby Lebanese grocery store, grab whatever, come back and chow down, and then pass out and rebuild. 2 days I built that classroom, and it was bonkers. I can't even describe the nonsense I had to put up with. However, my next program that I run, I didn't build all of those servers. I talk all my students through that. Each student got to build their own individual machine. So it did compress my timeline I didn't have to sleep on a floor. It was a good opportunity for my students to learn on a sort of explanation, demonstration, imitation sort of scenario. And right from the get-go, right from day one of the course, they somehow felt, I believe, that I wasn't just an academic nerd, teaching out of a dusty book. I had my hands in there. I was in the trenches with them, had the screwdriver, had the grease on my elbow kind of thing, and kind of leading from the front, as it were, as ridiculous as that sounds. So my point is this, that, if I would have just stayed locked in, I'm always going to build out my classrooms, I'm always going to be that guy, I'm going to set the standard before they show up, it would have been the wrong play. The second iteration was the right play.
Yeah, and I think, the beauty of it is you kind of have to do it wrong.
Yeah, you do.
You have to go through that, especially as I think a teacher. You want to set your students up for success right away. You want to be like, okay, everything's working, everything's running. Let's begin. But I like the idea because there's nothing quite. I thinking back to when I built my first computer system, like a decade plus ago. There's a sense of ownership to it, right? You get to develop that skill, and you go, well, now I know what these things do, and now I know where these things go, instead of just having a box and going, make whirling machine work. Like, where's the internet? Versus, what actually all the pieces do and all the wiring is, and it's a interesting concept, actually. Now that I stop and think about it, is understanding the lanes of everything.
Oh yeah.
Right? How the wiring works and from what to where and why that does this and so on and so forth. There's a lot of almost flow to it that you have to figure out. Similar to working electrical, similar to working plumbing. Like, you have to understand the flow of it. So describe that to us. How did you figure that out, the flow?
You know how I did it? And this is going to sound trippy, but I just started thinking of it like Tron.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
I mean, I could build it out, but what's the point? I mean, you get it.
Yeah. The fun part, Tron's a great example, and how linear everything is. And yet, through that linear process, everything becomes that much more complicated.
Yeah. Isn't it beautiful?
It is a lot of fun. So anybody else, if anybody's got any comments, those that are watching, by all means, ask us some questions. We're going to be hanging out here, just chilling. What are you drinking, by the way?
That is a great question. So it is a Colombian, and it is the Gasca Brothers. It is a pink bourbon, and it is tasty. Did I give you some of the Gasca Brothers? I'm not sure. I
believe so. I think so.
Okay, I'm not sure. Maybe not.
You know what? I missed my opportunity when we were down at the ranch, and I saw you making your coffee, and I was like, well, I don't want to take any of his beans.
Oh no, you should have. I didn't even
and
think.
I should have asked, but yeah.
Dude, you should have just come straight over, and we could have made a couple of coffees together, swapped some notes, figured it out. Not like anyone was teaching anyone anything, but just swapping ideas, of course.
That would have been really. I totally thought about that after we'd all sat down and drank coffee, and then we watched as you almost spit it out on the carpet.
Hey,
not your coffee, not your coffee.
Hey,
yeah. Okay, so the funny part is, I missed that opportunity, but I recognized it afterwards, and I would really have loved to sat down. But can you, I guess, tell us a little bit more about? I've always wondered what the bourbon is, because I thought it was bourbon right off the bat.
Yeah.
But explain that for those that don't know.
Yeah, so I've been hit with that sort of comment or question in the past about bourbon and what style of bourbon am I drinking, and it's always the reference to the whiskey or the liquor, and so far as to be asked what casks is that bourbon being stored in, and it makes sense. If you don't know that there's a variety of different kinds of beans out there, not just Arabica or Robusta, but it breaks down into certain subgenomes and all that good stuff. So bourbon is a type of bean that is an old style of bean, an heirloom bean that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. And so it would be just like a bourbon would be like an apple versus an orange versus a banana. Within the coffee world, you have all of these various fruits, and those fruits have a bean name, one of them being bourbon. And so there's many of these varietals. And so you can take a bourbon bean, or take an apple, we'll call it, and you can grow that in Colombia versus growing it in Ethiopia versus growing it in Guatemala, whatever the case is. So this bourbon varietal is going to pick up the terroir, or the soil, the rain, the wind, the sun, whatever shade trees are above it. All of these factors will grow that bourbon in a way or an impact or an influence that will create a unique property within the bourbon bean that is can't be replicated in another part of the world. Because in another part of the world where that bourbon bean is growing, of course, the terroir, or the wind, the soil, the sun, all of that good stuff, that's impacting that, we'll call it identical bean, but in a different part of the world. And that's the beautiful part about coffee, is if a country is only growing one season, there's 2 growing seasons, so you can have 2 crops per year sometimes. But if it's growing one crop that year, and a bourbon is in Colombia and a bourbon is in another country, identical beans will create different cups simply because of the terroir. And that's very much like wine, of course. And not too many people understand this, but coffee, last I checked, was the most complex food known to man, in the sense of how much it presents for the palate, for the nose, for the kind of sensory observation of a cup of coffee. A bourbon in Ethiopia versus Colombia will have 2 radically different taste profiles if you're searching at a granular level. If you're searching for sweet, ripe strawberries versus young blueberries. And so those 2 notes are radically different. But if you're not searching for the granularity in the cup, then you'll just taste hot and brown from 2 different countries.
Yeah.
And so, bourbon is just a varietal, one of many, and that varietal grows in all kinds of countries, and that year's crop will be different than the following year's crop based on the plant, which direction the plant was facing on which particular day that it rained that day. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's interesting how much this is, it's almost similar to cultural separation, in terms of, like, you can take a person and raise them in a certain area, and you take that same person, raise them in a different area, and you're going to get 2 culturally different people, and they're going to come up differently. They're going to have different experiences. So it's interesting that you could take a somewhat innocuous item like a bean and develop it to the level that you can pick apart, piecemeal the different notes of it, and be able to dive into it. Similar to wine, similar to whiskey, like, that's part of the game of tasting, is using prefrontal cortex kind of stuff to really develop a tasting note and how they separate from each other, versus just, you can drink a bottle of whiskey and call it whiskey.
You can.
Right? So
you can, and so there's another layer to it, of course, and you'll understand this. So if you would have come over while I was making that coffee, and we would have swapped notes, as the example, or thrown ideas back and forth to each other as to how to either make a better cup of coffee, or what you're experiencing in this moment, or what's the general vibe of things, or how does that taste now versus 10 minutes from now. If we would have entered into that conversation, there's that additional, I'm not going to say it's a veneer layer, because it's actually quite deep and rich. There's an additional layer to not just tasting the coffee, or not just tasting the whiskey. There's the set and setting. And so, the set, if we're standing in the kitchen just goofing around and punching each other in the shoulder and having a few laughs, chirping back and forth, that coffee is a different coffee than if we're both, like, really in the moment, really present, really considering things, deeply engaged in the process, thoughtfully constructing our sentences. Those are 2 different scenarios, 2 different sets, and that will create a different cup of coffee in those 2 experiences. And then the setting is like, is it raining outside? Is it gray and dull? Or can you see the chief? Can you see the mountains in Seb's through his living room, and the sun's just blazing in and everyone's upbeat? And so that cup of coffee isn't just taste and smell. It's not just a singular sensory experience. The 360 bubble that's wrapped around you, as far as your perception is capable, whether you're only feeling the kitchen, whether you're feeling the whole house, whether you're feeling the entire property, whether you're feeling the chief, whether you're feeling the sun, all of these different concentric circles, how much you fold into that 3-dimensional bubble of perception in the moment, that's what creates a different cup of coffee than just you sitting in your basement, bummed out as you're building a computer. If we were in your living room, hanging out in the sunshine, having a few laughs, teasing each other, chirping back and forth, that is a different cup of coffee than the one down in your basement. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about how important the setting is for those types of conversations, for really any interaction. And I think that one of the beautiful things about the show is that we try to maintain an environment that is, I guess, developed enough to hold the conversations that we have, right? Because if we were, like you said, goofing around, just laughing ha and poking fun at each other, that wouldn't create the environment necessary to have the in-depth conversations that we do here. Similarly, to sitting at the counter there, goofing off versus being in the moment and experienced with it. Now, a couple little comments I want to touch on here. Dan Cameron says, God dang it, I missed my H-time. Morning, gentlemen. Good to see you. And it looks like the Slav Commander is watching too, which is always good to see.
What? What the heck is he doing?
I know, right? We got Natty Emerald. Yes, and he's sitting there in the background going, oh, those guys.
Yeah, those guys.
Natty Emerald jumped in here and said hello from Brazil. Good to see you, buddy.
Nice.
And so I want to discuss this a little bit more, because I think this is a great concept, is that creating your environment to do the things that you want to do. If you want to have an in-depth discussion with somebody, pre-setting that up in, like, not so much a manipulative way, but in a creating a conversational loop or a style to kind of bring the conversation to the depths that you want it to go? Or do you think that perhaps we should just, like, kind of punch people in the teeth with it and go jump into the conversation as deep as you want? What do you think?
Well, that was our first year on the podcast.
Yeah.
So that was a different kind of kitchen to have coffee in. And now we're in a different kitchen, having a different kind of coffee. And so just like learning how to hang out in the right room with the right vibe, having the right coffee is a learned process. And so, you know, I think there's many ways that podcasts can be done, and we've done it a few different ways. And that was kind of important to me. And I know that we screwed some things up, mostly me, because you know what I'm like. I'm a lunatic sometimes. But I did have to explore the space to some degree so that I understood the entire battle space. I understood what not to do again. I had to explore. I had to kick a few cans down the road, as it were, to see how far they went and what they sounded like, until I found the right can, the right way. And once I settled into the podcasting thing, now I feel reasonably good about how we run the show. And so, but that takes time, man. And I think that's also relevant to the sort of kitchen coffee conversation. If a person just kind of steps in and it's the first coffee and they're not paying attention, they're just handed one and they're being a lunatic, just talking super loud and spinning around in circles and spilling coffee everywhere. You know, the coffee is not being appreciated by the individual, and no one's actually appreciating the individual as they're spinning around spilling coffee. And so the vibe has to meet the greater vibe in the room or in the house or whatever the case is. If you come in too much and everyone's all chillaxed right away, it's a thorn in someone's side. And so finding your way to synchronize to the moment and just takes time. And then maybe the better question that I'll throw back at you is, I've done it, you've done it, we've all done it. We've been inappropriate in a moment. We were either acting out or we were like too subdued or whatever. We didn't play it right. Mm-hmm. And so you go back and you think like, wow, I kind of blew that one. But then what? Like, you can keep on blowing things for the rest of your life. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
But at what point do you like sit back and revisit your actions and think, why do I want to do it better? That's generally where I'm going. So what are your thoughts?
I think this is hilarious because last night after class, after jiu-jitsu, I was talking with one of the younger guys in the class, and he started telling me about how, the political climate and all these things, and I was just like, cool, man, whatever. I don't play with that game. And he goes, oh, well, what game do you play with? And I said, I play with my Y game. And he goes, what? And then I literally, as I was saying it, I knew it was directly from you, and it was, you know what you should do? I got an exercise for you. You should go home. You should sit down at a table with a piece of paper and a pen.
Yes,
and
buddy.
Write Y at the top, and don't get up until you have an answer. And he was like, oh, I know my Y. And I was like, oh yeah, what is it? And he goes,
here we go.
And we went right down. It's like down the rabbit hole. And I watched him do the exact same thing that I did, I think, when you first hit me with this question, was go, oh, and like realizing that you had not put any thought into it. You had just always reacted to the question.
You assumed that you had the answer.
Exactly. And then, so to answer your question with this is that I think the moment that the thing that needs to happen is either A, somebody needs to ask you the question and you have to realize that you don't have the answer, or you have to find the answer, and that's realizing you don't have the answer. So a lot of it is like, it's either you fail hard enough or you figure it out yourself, or you fail hard enough and somebody comes up and goes, man, what was that all about? And then that begins the process. That
takes bold action.
It does.
And by the way, and this is for anyone who's listening, that takes bold action on two sides of the coin. And so if you're blowing it in a room, if you're acting out, being goofy, someone in the room should put you in check. And it doesn't have to be super duper hard. It doesn't have to be like an chainmail fist, but someone's got to put you in check. If they got to pull you off to the side quietly, or if there's no time to do that, and you've got a pattern of like not listening, then you got to be put in check. And that takes bold action from someone in the room. And if the bold action doesn't happen in the room, then that individual has got to go home and like have some bold action in their own introspection or reflection or in their own mind. They've got to be bold enough to say, man, I pooched that. I got to do it better. And this is what I'm going to do next, and then execute against that next iteration. That takes bold action. And so if someone isn't bold enough in the room, and you're not bold enough to face yourself in the mirror when you get home, then what? Presto changeo. You're not being invited back to the room, and then you never know. You never know anything about that room from that point forward. In fact, that room will haunt you until you square it up in your head. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. It is one of the most, I think that's regret, really. That's where it stems from, is you screwed it up badly enough and you were never invited back, or you just never wanted to go back, or you feared going back, or you had a really bad time and decided that it's not for you. Mm-hmm. And that is, interestingly enough, I was driving the other day and I had this thought that our expansion and contraction of breathing is very similar to the way in which we engage with life. So stick with me here as I describe this. Basically, as we grow and learn and develop, we expand our consciousness, right? We go outwards to a limit or an extent where we either we achieve what we wanted to do, like, hey, I want to be a doctor. And you expand your knowledge until you become a doctor, and you're like, okay, comfortable here, or you reach a limit of exploitation that doesn't allow you to go further. In which time we go internal, and you either have a minor civil war within yourself and fight over it, or you realize what you need to change things, and then allows you to expand further, and then eventually hit a limit of exploitation and then come back in. And it was just an interesting theory I had. And I think it applies to what we're talking about, in the manner that you have to reach that limit of exploitation and fail hard enough that you then have to look inside and go, man, I need to change some things. Or do it again. You turn back out external, reach that same limit of exploitation, fail, and go back in again. What do you think?
Well, you know how I love playing with analogies.
Hit me.
So I'm just gonna play with it in a couple of different ways and see what you think. So I'm just gonna, for a moment, slide it off to the side as to the full extent of the inhale and exhale, because there's an entire podcast on that.
Yeah.
Let's just focus on removing the mechanicalistic aspects or the mechanistics of things. Let's just talk about what you're doing. What are you sucking in and pushing out? It's oxygen and carbon dioxide. And so in with the good, out with the bad. And you know what oxygen is? It's energy. And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a mechanical application that people will focus on, but really, at the end of the day, it's all just energy, baby. That's what's happening. There's this sort of overlayer of ribs moving and lungs pumping and all of that good stuff, but that is the, several layers above, or if we're talking about computer operating system sort of hardware software interfaces, the OSI model, or the various models that will sort of, at this point, this is the energy, and at this point, this is the ribs. And so we're just talking about the fundamental aspects of energy being controlled in that expansion and contraction. And whether it's external or internal is neither here nor there. That is another podcast unto itself. But let's play with it in a different direction, just so you've got a couple of things to chew on, and then see what you got. So you're talking about, how expansion and contraction as you're breathing, that is a way to kind of understand maybe where you are in life, or the career that you're pursuing, or have you reached your maximum, etc. One of the interesting things about this is when you start running. And so when you start running really hard, really fast, now you're sprinting up a hill, all out of breath. The interesting piece is how things expand and how things contract when you're full tilt, going cross-eyed, 11 out of 10, ready to vomit. That process is a podcast unto itself. So what are your thoughts?
I feel we got another couple topics for things to talk about coming up, but I liked what you did with the concept of velocity, right? If you're going to increase your velocity, then the rate at which that contraction and expansion happens increases. So we've talked about this before, right? In terms of, if you really want to grow fast, it's going to be intense, and you have to achieve a certain level of velocity in anything. I look at training martial arts in general. If you look at fighters, they go to a fight camp, and it's just the velocity and the intensity of what you're learning just through the roof, balls to the walls, and their skill level rises to meet it, or it doesn't. So I really like what you did there with the concept of velocity being so important, because if I really want to chill and relax and grow at a slower rate, perhaps, or maybe a more refined rate, then that takes I have to choose to slow down. Similarly, I have to choose to speed up. But I wonder at what's the middle ground there, where we're not choosing our velocity, the velocity is just set. Is that a 0 to you, or is that a 3, or is that a 5? Is that like, what's your standard, do you think?
Well, that's a good question for everyone. I mean, everyone should be thinking these kind of things, like, where's your homeostasis right now, and where will it be 5 minutes from now, and where will it be an hour from now, and where will it be a week from now? I feel that these things are constantly changing, and for most people, they're constantly changing in an unaware state. And so the moment that you become aware of how to shift your scale, as it were, to be balanced in that moment, it's a great skill to have. It's a great internal practice, or a great realization to just be present with who you are right now, and are you just off balance a little bit in this moment, and realizing that, like, a moment from now you can rebalance. So if you're saying dumb stuff, like if I start saying dumb stuff, and none of this is planned, of course, it's just flowing out of me from the universe and all that good stuff, but if I'm saying something dumb 12 seconds from now, and I can retract the sentence, or I can say, yeah, I'm not really sure if that was on point, what do you guys think? Or I can let it sit and see how the guest or the panel or you respond. And even if I've gone about it in a wrong way, the angle will get us to where we need to be, as long as I just take a tactical pause, have a bit of patience, don't drop straight into instant apology, just see how it unfolds. And then as I'm just observing the unfolding, I'm rebalancing. And so if I get back into the conversation to not manipulate it, but engage in it, then as long as I'm doing it for the right reasons, like literally trying to do my best in a balanced state, generally speaking, things end up where they're supposed to end up in a conversation, I feel. What do you think?
So this is an interesting concept to play with, in that I think your ability to say something stupid or do something wrong or make a mistake and then process it and change is going to be influenced by the room you're in too. So I was just thinking about how, like, if you're in a really good community, if you have a really solid group of people around you and you screw up, you say something dumb, or you read the room wrong or whatever, and things like alter, if you move on like nothing has happened and just keep doing the way you're doing, that's where you get slid out of the room. But if you can make an adjustment in the fly, like realize like, oh, I did something wrong there, I need to change my energy, I need to but you re-engage with everybody in a different way, that's how you modulate yourself into a room. Agreed. And then you can build from there, right? And I think that's it's a skill set a lot of us don't have, I think, because I remember being young and like, this is how I am, either take it or leave it, right? And
it's a weak excuse. Yeah,
it is. Versus being able to slide into a room and be like, okay, well, what's the vibe here? Are we giver it? Like, you can feel it on the mats too constantly. When somebody really wants to go, they'll go. Or you can modulate them and you can slow everything down a little bit and allow their energy to come down as well. I think this is a great application for life, but it takes conscious thought. It takes a lot of direct, what am I doing in this moment? How do I modulate? How do I change? What just happened? And being able to think on your feet. Do you think you need to be perhaps a quick thinker, or somebody who can modulate quickly, or does that depend on the room too?
Well, I think it's helpful. I really do. But if you're not, then there's still a way to do it, of course. And that is understand yourself and how to be present in the moment appropriately for that room, for that vibe, for that setting. And so I'm just going to throw something at you that I'll be interested to hear your opinion. So if you've been in a room where you're not playing it right, your initial entry into the room, before you start clover leafing the room over a matter of days or weeks or months or years, whatever the case is, on that initial entry, you blow it. You play it wrong because either you didn't know the room, or you don't know yourself, or you don't know the rules, or whatever. You just do it wrong. And so that is not a one-way highway where you back out of the room and think, God, I torched that, or I'm never going back in there again, or whatever you tell yourself. That's the one-way highway piece. But a room is a two-way highway. And everyone in that room who kind of let you dangle on the end of your rope, and then you turned on your heel and walked out and said to yourself, I'll never go in there again. Everyone in that room is now complicit or responsible for letting you walk out feeling that way. Because any single person in that room could have easily said, hey, man, come on over here a sec. Just want to have a quick chat. And that two-way highway conversation, that's what reestablishes the sort of the connection with the room. Because you might be in there 30 seconds and thinking, screw these guys, they suck because they don't like me. And just before you turn on your heel, if the right person at the right time says the right thing in a two-way highway conversation, then bam, now you're still in the room. Even if you walk out, you're still in the room, and you know you're in the room because the dude or whatever said something that kind of eases off the pressure valve on the pressure cooker, or just makes you feel like, hey man, like, appreciate you showing up, and maybe you just need to take a moment and think about some of the crazy things that you said, and here's the crazy things that you said, and just think about it, man, and hit me up later today, or shoot me a DM, or drop me a line. You've got my number, or whatever. I don't think it's right ever to let someone walk out of a room in silence. I just don't. And even if you've got to say things that are uncomfortable, and I mean bold, if you've got to be bold in that moment to help that guy who's just about to step out of the room, then be freaking bold. And so the option at that point, that branching moment, is if you're not bold, if I'm not bold when you're about to step out of that room and flip as the bird and never want back in and hate on us, if I'm not bold, then I am complicit in you walking out of that room and flipping the bird. Like, I might as well have flipped the bird to the room. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. And it's there's another piece that I want to touch on in this, in that the concept of they don't like me. Like, that is one of the biggest excuses I've ever heard in my life, and I've said it I don't know how many times.
Me too.
But, and I'm sure pretty much everybody has. But it took me a while to realize that whether or not people like me, it plays very little into the actual game of what it is we're doing in life. And if you can be, I've worked with people that I don't like that were highly skilled, and we've been able to work together just fine. We've been able to be in a room together just fine. But there's other people who I haven't liked, who couldn't work in that room, and that became a constant negative, constant drain on the rest of the group. So it's interesting how that plays into it in the group dynamics of how everybody actually feels about one another to that game. Now, to your point about the being bold in that moment, I think also you're going to do that wrong a bunch of times too.
Oh yeah,
right. Like,
I have.
you're going to say a lot of dumb things. You're going to, and to your point, actually, I had this is an interesting story from way back in the day, but I was pulled aside after I had pulled aside somebody. Wasn't so much directed, but it was a correction, and it was like, you need to do that better. This is start doing this, start doing that, et cetera, et cetera. But so there are times where you being bold will require somebody else to be bold as well.
For sure.
And lay it into you.
For sure. But that's responsible chain of command. That's responsible leadership. And that goes back to, and I think Ash and I said it, when the three of us were hanging out late one evening in Karsten, I literally said, I was taught when I was a young buck, and I mean young, to never pass a fault. Yeah. And that slogan, never pass a fault, just kind of came up with me as a young private, then corporal, then master corporal, then sergeant, then warrant. That's just the way it was. It was one of my themes that were driven into my little peanut, and that's how I ran my career, never pass a fault. And it's not like I was the only one who believed in that. There was a bunch of my peers who I thought were cool as hell, and it was never pass a fault. And so I think that within a chain of command, and there's a chain of command in a room sometimes, and that change of command switches, not just on the daily, but in the moment, depending on what's going on at the moment. And so whatever the chain of command is in that room, and I'm calling it a chain of command as a loose term, there are responsibilities when these kind of things happen, that if someone pulls someone aside, then maybe someone needs to pull the guy who pulled the guy aside and have that conversation, just as you described. And so it's not about being in the military, I don't think. I think it's just about understanding never pass a fault.
This is an interesting thing too, because the concept of never pass a fault is, I think, challenging for a lot of people, because to never pass a fault, that means you can't pass any faults from yourself first, and then start working your way outwards. And I think that's one of the challenges for many people, especially when we transition out of the military. I think a lot is that mentality of constantly almost seeking a fault to correct, something to fix. And I think that I know for myself and a lot of my guys who I've talked to really have a hard time not having something to fix, not having something to engage, or seeing everything that needs to be fixed and trying to do it all. And so I think this is one of the challenges from getting out of the military. But you're right, it's not a military specific thing. It's just whether or not you want to be that type of person or not, I believe.
Yeah, well, to your point, we were all taught it, and it's a hard thing to let go. And so I've made a boatload of mistakes after I left the military, like trying to fix things that I had no place fixing in conversations or in relationships or with whatever, all of it. Like sometimes you just got to let things be, let things go, let it unfold, let it slide, let it not like disappear, but just not be, chewing on that bone, lock in like you're solving the planet in a tiny little moment. And there's a balance, of course, but you got to do it wrong a bunch of times. You got to do it right a bunch of times. Then you got to find your sweet spot and you got to play with it. And eventually, you do it better rather than doing it worse. But I don't think there's any perfect algorithm. And I've got no equation to play it right every time. I try my best, and sometimes I get it wrong, and then I'll reiterate.
So this goes back to the beginning of the conversation, actually, with there is a line that you have to figure out in your own self of I'm out of my depth, or I'm not playing this right, or I don't know what I'm talking about right now, et cetera, et cetera. Similar to with my computer, I reached a point that like I'm beyond my depths at this point. I don't know what I'm doing. I need somebody else's help. I have to engage another lane. And finding that line is probably one of the more challenging things to do in life.
It is
realizing where you need help.
But you kind of went through it. Like, I mean, it's not like again, there's no linear algorithm that is step 1, step 2, step 3, all the way to step 47. There is that doesn't exist. There's a general concept, and then you're in the moment and you're playing it not by ear, but you're just playing with the moment. And so, when you were early into your early frustrations with the new workstation that you were building, you said, hey, can we jump into a quick Zoom call or a quick video call? And I said, yeah, I got a couple of minutes. And we talked for, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 minutes. And we're talking about all kinds of things. And then just randomly, as you were talking about your boot drive, I said, hey, why don't you just take that 1 terabyte boot drive or 2 terabyte boot drive and transition or partition it into your boot drive and then your rapid store read-write abilities for video manipulation, then use the other drives for blah, 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 RAID 5 and et cetera. And so just that quick inject of why not try this opened your mind to possibilities in that moment. And then prior to that, you were kind of like a little bit down. And then immediately after that sentence was said, you were kind of like starting to spark up of like, oh yeah, your mind was expanded on how to solve the problem again. It doesn't mean that my solution was right or wrong. It just means that it's an inject. It's a new idea for you to kind of re-engage the process that you were feeling a bit quicksanded in. So I think that conversations, when someone's feeling a bit down, they're feeling a bit like they've done their best, but there is no solution. Just throwing something in from a different angle and then letting the person unfold it themselves is a way to kind of elevate their game in the moment. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It even though that particular piece of partitioning that drive wasn't going to help me solve the problem, but what it did was give me an external lane to re-engage the problem-solving process. So I was able to start troubleshooting based off of a different concept. And so I've been troubleshooting since Friday.
That's great.
It's been a trial, because even today, this whole conversation is set up in a very, if you guys could see all the wires going everywhere right now that it's in front of me, you guys would laugh. But I got this set up on my laptop, and I'm freaking all over the place, and it's it's challenging because I know what my standard is. I know what I want to bring to the table, and I haven't been able to. So the ability that I've gained through all of these hundreds of podcasts that we've done is to lock in a moment, as we did right at the beginning, take a second, re-engage the conversation, and reset, which is my jiu-jitsu professor hits me with this all the time. He's just like, you can just reset. You don't have to fight through a position. And I'm like, what do you mean? But the ability to reset is probably one of the more useful skill sets to have in life, because we're going to screw up. We're going to do it wrong. We're going to do it a million ways from Sunday. But to be able to calmly reset into what we're doing and move forward again without with new information allows us to continue to expand. That plays into the earlier concept we had going. But you got any other thoughts before we shut her down for the evening? We're almost an hour here, so
yeah, this afternoon. Yeah, so yeah, I do. I've got a couple of thoughts. So it is important to reboot, to recenter, to restart on a new minor trajectory in your day with a reboot. And so I literally put that up in my stories, my Instagram stories, about what, I don't know, yesterday.
Yeah,
and I simply stated 6 hours of writing, reboot time.
Yeah.
And the background song actually says reboot. Makes little computer noises in Presto Changeo. That's me on the bag, just for 18 seconds, just namasteing out and just chillaxing with the bag to get back onto a different trajectory with a little bit more, with a different energy. And so lots of things throughout the day can be tough, but doing a pattern interrupt, but properly centered pattern interrupt is important. Not just a distraction reboot, but a centered reboot is important. Don't you think?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we just talked about it in the last episode on grounding, right? Being able to find your center in the moment and re-engage. But I think there's.
Let me say this: that as you described, your desk, your office is full of cables and all of that good stuff, but no one can see that, and that's a super important point, because there's a phrase out there, and it is "No one cares, work harder." And so I take that slogan to mean, like, just stop your whining and start freaking action and get some things done. It's the part about no one cares that sort of bugs me a little bit, because I actually care. I care that I know exactly what is in your room right now that no one can see, because I've been there. Like, my room looks like that sometimes. But no one cares the gong show that you're in right now. They just want results. They're all focused on the work harder, produce. Where's the outcome? I don't want to hear the whining. I just want to see you kick that ass. And that's super important. But the other part about no one cares, that's the problem with that slogan. When it's worn on a t-shirt with typically some dude all flared out, actually projecting that I don't care about you, and I don't care about your opinion, and I don't care about anything because I'm working hard. I don't agree with that. And so there's a sweet spot in there where I don't care to hear your whining, but I care about the fact that you're producing and not like overly whining, as it were. And so we all have to do it wrong. I've whined a ton in the past about certain things that I could have just summed up and got on with working. But you kind of got to screw it up to start heading in the right direction, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, we've said that 3 or 4 times over this episode specifically, but I love that you brought this up, because the nobody cares portion is the same thing that bugs me about it, is that I do care, but I also want you to work harder. Like, yeah, absolutely, work hard. But and I care to see you, and especially with people that I train or that I teach or that I'm trying to help out of a dark spot. It's like, I absolutely care about your your eventual outcome. I 100% do care about that. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm helping. Right. That's why I'm engaging. But absolutely, work harder, because like the excuses that, because you can. Yeah, and the excuses don't matter. And even if you get to a point where you have to go, okay, I need help. Well, good. You got to that point. Now you found somebody. You can go find somebody to help. And eventually you won't need somebody to help. That's why we have coaches. That's why we have teachers. That's why we have instructors and people who are out there doing their best to develop the world. So interestingly, this will be my last little story before we shut her down. The gentleman I was talking to, and I was asking the why question to, and sending him to his table so that he can go sit down until he has an answer. We had been discussing a little bit earlier how difficult it is to learn a new skill. And I was like, well, yeah, but over time it comes. And he's like, well, it just doesn't seem to be working for me. And I'm like, I was there, and so was the last person, and so was the last person, until they asked the right questions of the right people, or they got the right help from the right coach, or they got to a point where they said, I just don't know. I got to find somebody. And that's what brings people into martial arts gyms. It's what brings people into art academies. It's what brings people into everything, is that they reach a limit of what their capability is, or their curiosity drives them. But they always have to ask that question of, how do I do that? And then they ask the right person, and the right person shows them. And then they can show it to the next person. Down the road.
So I agree, but there is a bit of granularity to that, because it's not just a universal, Tim or Tom or Bill or James or whatever the case is. When that question is thrown at you as a coach, you can't just look at that person as exhibit A, and everyone's an exhibit A.
Yeah.
Because there's exhibit A all the way through to Z or Z. Yeah. And that spectrum of exhibits that show up on day one, irrespective of whether they've done BJJ or not, or a martial art ever in their life, it's not about that. It's about how many times that person has learned how to learn a skill, has learned how to be centered in the moment, has pooched it so many times and won it so many times that they know how to do it lickety split. And so you can have a couple of people sit down on the mat in front of you on day one, and one already knows how to learn. The other one's just learning how to learn. And that means they're learning themselves. And so if someone has a really broad life experience, tons of experience in all kinds of things, and they step onto the mat on day one, chances are, as long as they can be humble and stay centered and not let their ego get out of control, they're going to flourish. They're going to excel in that environment, because they know themselves. They know how to learn. They know how to optimize the process for them, not for maybe anyone else on the mat, because again, they're just a day one white belt, but they know enough about them that they can boom, boom, boom into the future pretty quickly. Whereas someone who steps onto the mat and knows literally nothing about themselves because they've never gone through those life experiences, it's a slow learning rate, because they got to learn how to learn first before they learn,
Yeah, I could not agree more with that one. But we are just about an hour now, so let's get some final thoughts on anything we've talked about, which is quite a bit. We've kind of crossed a few spectrums here, but anything left over you want to let the people know?
No, just let's get that episode rewired again, or let's get that sorted out. Hurry up and sort out your computer, bro. What is even happening?
I am working on it. I am literally doing my best.
I know.
And, hopefully the system will be up and running later today, and I'll be able to throw a clip together, maybe from today or from last week or something, and we'll be able to keep smashing from there, and I can really start testing what this system is capable of. It is well outside my capabilities, I tell you that.
It's testing me right now, I'll tell you that.
Well, then we'll shut her down as we all continue to learn, build, and grow. See y'all next week.
Jim.
Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.